The strange thing about fate is that it never knocks politely. Sometimes it walks back into your life carrying 15 years of silence, a broken smile, and secrets written in bruises you were never supposed to see. The crystal flute slipped from her hand and shattered across the marble floor. The sound echoed through the ballroom, sharp enough to cut through the laughter of Manhattan's wealthiest guests. Conversations paused. Heads turned. I looked up from the charity board meeting I had spent the last hour pretending to care about, ready to dismiss the interruption like everyone else. Then I saw her. For a moment, the world simply stopped. The gold chandeliers above us blurred into streaks of light. The music faded into distant static. All I could see was the woman kneeling among scattered pieces of crystal, desperately trying to gather them before anyone could complain. My chest tightened so suddenly I almost forgot how to breathe. Emily Carter. 15 years had passed since I had seen her face. 15 years since the girl who used to race bicycles with me down cracked sidewalks in Brooklyn had vanished from my life without a goodbye. 15 years since I searched every place I thought she might be and found nothing but closed doors and unanswered questions. Yet somehow I recognized her instantly. Maybe it was the way she tucked a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear when she was nervous. Maybe it was those pale blue eyes I had never forgotten. Or maybe some people leave fingerprints on your soul that time cannot erase. She stood quickly, keeping her head lowered as if she hoped nobody would notice her embarrassment. But I noticed. God, I noticed everything. The black Maid uniform hung loosely from her frame. She looked thinner than I remembered. Tired. The kind of tired that sleep alone could never fix. Then my gaze dropped lower. My heartbeat stumbled. Beneath the fabric of her uniform, the gentle curve of a pregnant belly was unmistakable. The realization hit harder than it should have. Emily was going to be a mother. Questions slammed into my mind from every direction. Where had she been all these years? Who had been taking care of her? Why was she working here? Before I could stop myself, I was already moving across the ballroom. Guests stepped aside automatically. They always did. Years of power had created that effect. People moved when I entered a room. They lowered their voices. They watched carefully. But tonight I barely noticed them. My focus never left Emily. She reached for another tray beside a service station near the wall. Her hands trembled slightly. When she lifted the tray, the sleeve of her uniform shifted just enough for me to see it. A dark mark circled her wrist. Not makeup, not a shadow, a bruise. My stomach dropped. Emily quickly tugged the sleeve back into place, unaware that I had seen it. But I had. And suddenly nothing else in that room mattered. Not the donors. Not the executives. Not the politicians trying to buy favors with smiles and handshakes. Only Emily. Only that bruise. Only the terrible feeling growing inside my chest. Because after 15 years of wondering what had happened to the girl I never forgot, I had finally found her. And something was very, very wrong. Emily looked up before I reached her. For a fraction of a second, confusion crossed her face. Then recognition followed. The tray in her hands tilted slightly. Not enough to fall, but enough for me to notice. Her eyes widened exactly the same way they used to when we were kids, and she got caught sneaking cookies from the bakery on 43rd Street. Back then, that expression always made me laugh. Tonight, it felt like someone had wrapped a hand around my heart. Damien, she whispered. Hearing my name in her voice after 15 years was stranger than I expected. Some memories fade. Others wait patiently in the dark, unchanged. Hers had survived every year. Every mile. Every success. Every mistake. Emily. It was all I could manage. We stood there staring at each other while the gala continued around us. Waiters moved between tables. Glasses clinked. Somewhere across the ballroom, a string quartet played a song I could not identify. None of it felt real. Emily recovered first. She glanced toward the service entrance behind her, as if considering escape. Then she forced a small smile. It did not reach her eyes. I should get back to work. Work. The words sounded wrong. This was Emily Carter. The girl who once convinced an entire neighborhood to help save a stray dog. The girl who used to sketch fashion designs on notebook paper and swear she would own a studio one day. The girl who never stopped dreaming. Yet here she was carrying trays for people who probably never learned her name. You disappeared, I said quietly. The smile vanished. A shadow passed through her expression. That was a long time ago. I looked for you. Her gaze dropped to the floor. I know. The answer stunned me. You knew? She nodded once. People talk. News travels. Especially when someone becomes. She hesitated. You? I almost laughed at that, as if there was a simple explanation for everything that had happened since we were teenagers. As if power somehow erased loneliness. Then why did you never call? The question escaped before I could stop it. Emily looked away. Through the ballroom windows, rain streaked the glass and turned the Manhattan skyline into blurred lights. For a moment, she seemed far away again. Life got complicated. Complicated. Another answer that explained nothing. Before I could press further, a voice called her name. Sharp. Impatient. Emily immediately straightened. Her shoulders tightened. A middle-aged woman in an expensive dress stood near the dining area. Even from across the room, I could feel the disapproval radiating from her expression. Emily, the East Hall needs attention. Yes, ma'am. Emily lowered her head slightly and started to move. Then she stopped. It was good seeing you, Damien. Good seeing you. 15 years reduced to 4 words. She turned away before I could answer. I watched her disappear through a set of double doors near the kitchen corridor. The strange heaviness in my chest only grew stronger. Something about this entire situation felt wrong. Not just the bruise. Not just the exhaustion in her eyes. Everything. The woman I remembered had always filled every room with energy. This version of Emily seemed smaller somehow. Careful. As though she spent every day trying not to take up too much space. A familiar figure approached from behind. Vincent, my head of security, followed my gaze toward the hallway where Emily had vanished. You know her? He asked. I kept staring at the closed doors. Yes. Old friend. The oldest. Vincent studied me for a second. Then his expression shifted into the professional calm that usually meant bad news was coming. Do you want me to look into her situation? I should have said no. I should have respected her privacy. Instead, I remembered the bruise hidden beneath her sleeve. The tiredness she could not hide. The sadness in her eyes when I asked why she disappeared. Yes, I said quietly. Find out everything. And as Vincent walked away, I could not shake the feeling that whatever had happened to Emily Carter over the last 15 years was about to change both of our lives forever. Vincent was efficient. He always had been. By 10 o'clock the next morning, a thick folder sat on the corner of my desk overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows like a living machine, millions of people moving through lives I would never know. But there was only one life I cared about at that moment. Emily Carter. I opened the file and immediately felt something cold settle in my chest. The address listed for her apartment was in Queens, a building that had seen better decades. Rent-controlled. Poor maintenance history. Multiple ownership changes. Nothing about it matched the future she used to describe when we were 16 and sitting on the roof of her family's brownstone sharing cheap pizza while planning impossible dreams. The employment records were even worse. Temporary jobs. Long gaps between positions. Housekeeping. Caregiving. Reception work. Whatever she could find. Whatever paid enough to survive. I turned another page. Medical records. Limited insurance coverage. Several missed appointments over the years. Stress-related conditions. Exhaustion. The kind of warnings people ignored because life did not give them the luxury of slowing down. My jaw tightened. Emily had always been stubborn. The girl could sprain her ankle and still insist on finishing a 3-mile walk home. Then I reached the final section. Surveillance photographs from the gala. Images captured by security cameras over the previous month. Emily arriving before sunrise. Leaving after dark. Working 12-hour shifts with barely a break. I studied each picture carefully. Something felt wrong. Then I saw it. In one photograph, she stood near a service entrance speaking with a man I did not recognize. He looked older. Mid-40s maybe. Expensive watch. Expensive coat. His finger pointed inches from her face while she stared at the floor. Even through a still image, the interaction felt uncomfortable. The next photograph showed Emily walking away. The man remained behind watching her leave. Vincent appeared at the office door. I had a feeling that picture would get your attention. I looked up. Who is he? His name is Richard Holloway, a distant relative of the family that owns the estate where Emily works. Relative? Vincent nodded. Lives on the property. Has for years. I glanced back at the photo. Something about the man's expression bothered me. What else? Vincent hesitated. That alone told me I was not going to like the answer. Several employees reported that Emily seems afraid of him. A heavy silence settled between us. Outside the windows, rain clouds rolled over the city. Dark. Slow. Unavoidable. Afraid how? I asked. Nobody would give specifics. They only said she avoids being alone in the same room whenever possible. My hand tightened around the folder. I remembered the bruise, the exhaustion, the forced smile. Suddenly, all those pieces began fitting together into a picture I did not want to see. And the baby's father? Vincent exhaled. No records. No marriage certificate. No public information. Whoever he is not involved. I looked back at the photograph of Emily. For 15 years I had imagined finding her again. I pictured success, happiness, the life she deserved. Instead, I had found a woman carrying burdens she should never have faced alone. Before I could say another word, my phone vibrated across the desk. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. 3 simple words. It is Emily. Then another message followed. Please do not investigate. I stared at the screen as my heartbeat slowly accelerated. Because there was only one reason someone asks you to stop looking for the truth. They are terrified of what happens when the truth is finally found. The message stayed on my screen long after the phone went dark. 3 words. Please do not investigate. Most people would have seen a request. I saw a warning. Emily knew me too well. She knew that telling me not to do something was often the fastest way to guarantee I would do exactly that. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the rain sliding down the glass. 15 years ago, Emily had been the brave one. When older kids cornered me after school, she stepped between us without hesitation. When my father died and I stopped talking for weeks, she sat beside me every afternoon until I finally spoke again. She never walked away from people who needed help, which meant if she was asking for distance now, it was not because she wanted it. It was because she thought she was protecting someone. Maybe herself. Maybe her unborn child. Maybe both. I grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. By the time I reached the parking garage, the storm had intensified. Rain hammered against the concrete ceiling while my driver opened the rear door of the SUV. Queens, I said. Now. The drive took 40 minutes. Traffic crawled through wet streets glowing beneath red brake lights and neon reflections. The city looked different during storms. Sharper somehow. Lonelier. When we finally reached Emily's neighborhood, I understood immediately why the address in the file had bothered me. The apartment building stood squeezed between 2 aging storefronts. Several windows were dark. The paint peeled from the brick exterior. A flickering security light struggled against the weather. This was not the place Emily deserved. I stayed inside the vehicle for several minutes watching the entrance. At 8:23, she appeared carrying 2 grocery bags. Her coat looked too thin for the weather. One hand rested protectively against her stomach as she carefully climbed the front steps. Even from across the street, exhaustion seemed woven into every movement. Then something unexpected happened. Another vehicle pulled to the curb. A black luxury sedan. The rear door opened, and Richard Holloway stepped out. My jaw tightened immediately. He crossed the sidewalk toward Emily. She froze. The grocery bag slipped slightly in her hand. Richard said something I could not hear through the rain. Emily shook her head. He stepped closer. She took a step back. The interaction lasted less than 30 seconds before he handed her an envelope. Emily stared at it, but did not open it. Richard returned to his car and drove away. Only after the sedan disappeared did Emily continue inside the building. I sat motionless. Every instinct I had developed over the years screamed the same thing. Fear. Not panic. Not anger. Fear. I had seen it on countless faces before. Employees protecting jobs. Witnesses protecting secrets. People trapped in situations they could not control. Emily had looked exactly the same. My phone buzzed. Vincent, you are not going to like this, he said the second I answered. I just received footage from the estate. I felt my stomach tighten. What footage? There was a pause. A security camera captured Emily leaving work early this afternoon. And another silence. Longer this time. She collapsed in the parking area. Paramedics were called. Everything inside me went cold. Is she okay? She was conscious when they transported her. I was already opening the SUV door before he finished speaking. Rain immediately soaked my coat. Somewhere beyond the storm, ambulance lights reflected across wet pavement in my imagination. And for the first time since finding Emily again, a terrifying possibility entered my mind. What if I had found her too late? The hospital smelled like antiseptic and rain-soaked clothing when I stepped through the emergency entrance. My shoes carried water across the polished floor as I moved past reception without slowing down. People recognized me. They always did. Nurses glanced up from computer screens. Security guards straightened. Nobody stopped me. Vincent met me outside the maternity observation wing. His expression told me enough before he spoke. She is stable. Air finally returned to my lungs. And the baby? Also stable. I closed my eyes for a second. Relief hit harder than I expected. 15 years apart should have created distance. It should have made her another person from another life. Instead, hearing that she was safe felt like surviving something myself. Vincent handed me a visitor pass. The doctor wants to speak with family. I almost laughed. Family. I had not been family in a very long time. Yet somehow I found myself walking toward her room anyway. The hallway lights cast soft reflections across the floor. Machines hummed quietly behind closed doors. Somewhere nearby, a newborn cried. Life beginning. Life continuing. Life refusing to stop, no matter how complicated things became. Emily's room sat at the end of the corridor. The door was slightly open. Through the gap, I could see her sleeping. Or pretending to. Her blonde hair spread across the pillow. Dark circles rested beneath tired eyes. One hand remained over her stomach even in sleep, protective and instinctive. The sight did something strange to me. It reminded me of a summer afternoon when we were 13. A thunderstorm had rolled through Brooklyn, knocking out power across half the neighborhood. Emily had spent 3 hours protecting a cardboard box full of abandoned kittens she found near the train tracks. She sat beside them with a flashlight and an umbrella while rain poured through a broken garage roof. Somebody has to look after them, she told me. That was Emily. Always protecting something. Always carrying more than her share. The door opened behind me. A doctor approached holding a tablet. Are you a relative? He asked. Old friend. The doctor nodded. She experienced exhaustion, dehydration, and elevated stress levels. Nothing critical, but she needs rest. Real rest. Not 12-hour shifts. I looked back through the doorway. Emily still had not moved. Will she be okay? If her environment improves? The answer lingered long after the doctor left. Environment. Such a simple word. Yet it explained everything. People did not become this exhausted overnight. They became exhausted one difficult day at a time. One sacrifice at a time. One burden at a time. My phone buzzed. Another message from Vincent. Security footage attached. I opened the file. The grainy video showed the estate parking area from earlier that day. Emily walked toward her car carrying supplies. A few seconds later, Richard Holloway appeared. He followed her path. Not close enough to touch. Not close enough to attract attention. Just close enough to make her visibly uncomfortable. Then the footage ended. My jaw tightened. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked through the doorway one more time. Emily's eyes were open now. She was watching me from the hospital bed. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she gave me the saddest smile I had ever seen. I told you not to investigate, she whispered. And for the first time since finding her again, I realized she was not afraid that I would uncover the truth. She was afraid of what the truth would force me to do once I found it. Emily's voice barely rose above the hum of the hospital machines, but it carried enough weight to stop every thought in my head. I stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind me. Rain tapped against the window overlooking the city. Beyond the glass, Manhattan glowed beneath clouds and streetlights, restless and alive. Inside the room, everything felt fragile. Then tell me what is going on, I said. Emily looked away first. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt familiar. We had shared plenty of silences as kids. Back then they were comfortable. This one was not. You always did this, she said softly. You always tried to fix everything. I pulled a chair beside the bed. Maybe because nobody else was trying. A sad smile touched her lips. That is exactly why I never wanted you involved. The monitor beside her bed continued its steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Small sounds. Human sounds. The kind that reminded you what truly mattered. Emily glanced down at her stomach. Instinctively, her hand rested there again. Protective. Careful. The baby is all that matters now, she whispered. Everything else comes second. I followed her gaze. And who is protecting you? Her eyes shimmered with emotion she clearly did not want to show. I am managing. No. The word came out sharper than intended. I lowered my voice. No, you are surviving. Those are not the same thing. Emily stared at the ceiling for several seconds. When she finally spoke again, her voice sounded tired. Not physically tired. Soul tired. After my mother died, things fell apart faster than I expected. Medical bills, debt, jobs that disappeared. One bad year turned into another. She swallowed hard. Then I found out I was pregnant. The room seemed smaller suddenly. The father? I asked carefully. Emily shook her head. Gone before he even knew. There was no anger in her voice. No bitterness. Only acceptance. Somehow that made it worse. So you have been doing this alone? She nodded. I had to. Outside the door, distant footsteps echoed through the hallway. Somewhere nearby, a nurse laughed softly at something a patient said. Life continued. Yet all I could think about was Emily carrying every burden by herself, while I spent 15 years believing she had simply moved on. You should have called me. She laughed quietly at that. Damien, when was I supposed to call? Before or after you became one of the most powerful men in New York? Anytime. The answer came immediately. Emily looked at me then. Really looked at me. For the first time since the gala, I saw a glimpse of the girl I remembered. The one who challenged everyone. The one who never accepted easy answers. You mean that? Yes. Her eyes dropped. That is why I stayed away. Before I could respond, a notification appeared on my phone. A message from Vincent. One sentence. Richard Holloway has been removed from the estate management board effective immediately. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Several additional investigations are now underway. Emily noticed my expression. What happened? She asked. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. For the first time in years, I felt completely certain about something. Nothing you need to worry about anymore. And somewhere across the city, people who had spent years making Emily's life harder were beginning to discover what happened when someone finally stood between her and the world. Emily remained quiet long after I spoke. The city lights beyond the hospital window painted soft reflections across the room, turning the glass into a mirror of distant stars. I thought the conversation was over. Then she reached toward the drawer beside her bed and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. Do you remember this? She asked. I looked down and felt my breath catch. It was a friendship bracelet. Faded blue threads woven together by clumsy teenage hands. One side had frayed with age. The tiny metal charm attached to it had lost most of its shine years ago. Yet I recognized it immediately. Emily had made 2 of them during the summer before high school. One for herself, one for me. You kept it, I said quietly. She smiled. This time the smile was real. Small, gentle, familiar. I never stopped. A strange ache spread through my chest. 15 years. Different cities. Different lives. Different worlds. Yet somehow she had carried that bracelet through all of it. I thought you hated me, I admitted. Emily blinked. What? When you disappeared. The confession sounded ridiculous now. I thought maybe I had done something wrong. She stared at me for several seconds before shaking her head. Damien, you were the only good thing in my life back then. The words settled heavily between us. Then why leave? Emily looked down at the bracelet resting in her palm. The answer did not come immediately. When it finally did, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because my mother found out she was sick. I froze. She never told anyone how serious it was. Not even me at first. By the time she did, everything happened fast. We sold the house. We moved. The treatment started. Tears glimmered in her eyes. I thought we would come back. The room felt smaller with every sentence. But we never did. I remembered the empty brownstone, the moving truck, the unanswered phone calls. Years of wondering. Years of silence. All because a frightened teenage girl was trying to hold her family together. After she passed away, I kept meaning to reach out, Emily continued. But every year it became harder. You were building a life. I was just trying to survive mine. I looked away for a moment. If she only knew how many times I had searched her name. How many nights I wondered where she ended up. How many conversations I imagined having if I ever found her again. You should have given me the choice, I said softly. Emily's eyes met mine. There was regret there. And something else. Hope, maybe. Before either of us could say more, her phone buzzed on the bedside table. The moment she saw the screen, all the warmth disappeared from her face. Her shoulders stiffened. Her hand immediately moved toward her stomach. Instinct. Protection. Fear. My pulse quickened. Who is it? I asked. Emily hesitated. The phone continued vibrating. Then she slowly turned the screen toward me. A single name appeared across the display. Richard Holloway. Neither of us spoke. The ringing stopped after several seconds. Then another message appeared. This time there were only 6 words. We need to talk. Tonight. And for the first time since arriving at the hospital, I saw genuine fear return to Emily's eyes. The room seemed colder after the message appeared. Emily stared at the screen as if it contained something far more dangerous than 6 simple words. I watched her carefully. Fear is difficult to hide from someone who has known you since childhood. It changes the way you breathe, the way your shoulders tense, the way your eyes search for exits that do not exist. You do not have to answer him, I said quietly. Emily shook her head immediately. You do not understand. Then help me understand. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they looked older than before. Richard was not always like this. I leaned back in the chair beside her bed. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. What changed? Emily stared at the rain running down the hospital window. After my mother died, I was desperate for work. The estate needed staff. Richard helped me get hired. Her voice softened. At first I was grateful. I already knew there was a but coming. There always was. Then he started treating favors like debts. The sentence settled heavily between us. Nothing obvious. Nothing anyone could easily point to. Just constant reminders. Constant pressure. Constant expectations. She swallowed. Every time I tried to create distance, he found another reason to insert himself into my life. My jaw tightened. The pattern sounded familiar. Not criminal. Not dramatic. Just exhausting. The kind of behavior that slowly steals peace from someone one day at a time. And now? I asked. Emily glanced at the phone again. Now he knows he is losing control. A silence followed. Long, uncomfortable. Honest. Then she surprised me. You know the strange part? Her fingers lightly touched the friendship bracelet still resting beside her. The entire time, when things got difficult, I kept comparing everyone to you. I blinked. Me? A small laugh escaped her. You were my standard, Damien. The words hit harder than they should have. Whenever someone promised something and failed to deliver, I remembered the boy who spent an entire Saturday helping me find a lost dog. Her smile grew slightly. Whenever someone walked away, I remembered the boy who never did. I looked toward the window because suddenly meeting her eyes felt impossible. For years I had built an empire, acquired influence, earned respect, yet hearing that mattered more than any of it. The hospital room fell quiet again, comfortable this time, familiar, almost like those summer evenings on Brooklyn rooftops when neither of us needed to fill every silence. Then the monitor beside her bed beeped faster. Emily pressed a hand against her stomach and winced. Instantly I was on my feet. Emily. The expression passed quickly, but it was enough to send a wave of panic through me. A nurse entered moments later and checked the readings. After several minutes, she smiled reassuringly. Everything looks fine. The baby is just very active tonight. Relief flooded the room. Emily laughed softly and rested back against the pillow. Looks like someone already has strong opinions. The nurse left. I sat down again. For the first time since finding her, Emily looked peaceful. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Vincent. I opened it and immediately felt my pulse accelerate. Security records uncovered new information. Richard Holloway has been making private inquiries about Emily's pregnancy for months. I stared at the screen. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I slowly looked up at Emily. Because suddenly the situation was no longer just about the past. It was about something Richard clearly wanted in the future. The truth arrived quietly, not with sirens or headlines or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes the most important endings begin with a simple choice. 3 weeks after Emily left the hospital, Richard Holloway resigned from every position he held at the estate. Investigations into financial misconduct and unethical workplace practices spread through organizations that had once protected him. Doors that had always opened for him suddenly remained closed. Calls stopped being returned. Invitations disappeared. Nobody needed to threaten him. Nobody needed to raise a hand. The truth was enough. Emily never spoke about him again. She did not need to. Some chapters, in the moment you stop allowing them to control your future. Autumn arrived over New York in shades of gold and amber. The trees lining Central Park began to change color. The air turned crisp. And for the first time in years, Emily started smiling without forcing it. She moved into a small townhouse in Brooklyn near the neighborhood where we had grown up. Not because I asked her to, because she chose it herself. The house had a front porch, a white fence, and a kitchen large enough for the baking she always loved. Every decision belonged to her. Every step forward belonged to her. One Saturday afternoon, I found her sitting on the porch swing holding the old friendship bracelet. The same faded blue threads that had survived 15 years of distance. "You know," she said, watching children ride bicycles down the street, "I used to think losing people was just part of life." I sat beside her. "And now?" Emily smiled. "Now I think some people simply find their way back." A month later, on a cold November evening, her daughter entered the world. The first cry echoed through the hospital room like a promise. Tiny fingers, bright eyes, a perfect little girl weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces. Emily cried. I did too, although I blamed it on exhaustion whenever anyone asked. The nurse placed the baby in Emily's arms, and I watched something extraordinary happen. Every hardship, every fear, every lonely year. For one brief moment, none of it mattered. There was only love, pure and uncomplicated. "She is beautiful," I whispered. Emily looked down at her daughter and nodded. "She really is." Then she looked at me. "Would you like to hold her?" I had negotiated million-dollar deals without hesitation, faced situations that would make most people nervous. Yet nothing had ever terrified me more than holding that tiny child for the first time. She wrapped one impossibly small hand around my finger and refused to let go. Emily laughed softly through her tears. Looks like she already made her choice. 1 year later, the townhouse had become a home. Emily opened a non-profit center supporting single mothers and women rebuilding their lives after difficult circumstances. She named it Second Sunrise. I funded the building anonymously. She pretended not to know. We both enjoyed the game. On opening day, families filled the courtyard. Children played beneath strings of lights. Music drifted through the evening air. Emily stood beside me watching it all. "Do you ever regret anything?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. At the woman who had survived more than anyone should have to. At the mother she had become. At the friend I thought I had lost forever. "Only the years we missed," I said. Emily slipped her hand into mine. The sunset painted the sky gold above Brooklyn. Our daughter laughed somewhere across the courtyard. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt brighter than the past. Because power can open doors. Money can solve problems. Influence can change circumstances. But sometimes the thing that saves a life is much simpler. Sometimes it is being remembered. Sometimes it is being protected. And sometimes it is finally discovering that the person who never stopped looking for you was the person who was meant to walk beside you all along.